Alright, ladies and gents, yeah, yesterday you had to look at Adam Smith and all that really complicated writing, but today you look at somebody completely different. That would be Friedrich Hayek. That sexy stud muffin right there. Now, Friedrich Hayek was born Friedrich Augustus von Hayek. Interesting little piece of trivia, by the way. Von, if you ever see these in people's names, was originally a title of nobility in Austria and Germany. It lost all of that in 1919. But Hayek here, you sometimes also see him called F.A. Hayek. Really interesting guy. He was a Nobel Prize winner in 1974 for economics. He lived from 1899 to 1992, so he was, 92 years old when he died. But this guy was what became known as the Austrian school, or part of the Austrian school of economics, and a follower of this other economist named Ludwig von Mises. But the really, one of the key things here, and when you're reading Hayek, by the way, is you'll probably notice. Well, yeah. The reading is longer. It's like one page longer, whatever Smith was. However, if you actually start reading him, you're going to discover that he's a whole lot easier to read than what Smith was. Smith was writing in this older style English, whereas Hayek is writing in a more modern style English. He's also trying to get a little bit more of a popular audience, so he's going to make his writing a little bit easier to understand than what Smith did. So hopefully you're going to have an easier time with it. Don't be intimidated by this stuff. And look at each one of these paragraphs here. I give them the Roman numerals, so it makes it a little bit easier for you to be able to split it apart. Yeah, make sure you understand each one of these paragraphs before you move on to the next one, because it's kind of building as it goes along. If you're not sure about what the previous paragraph said, then it kind of defeats the purpose. But one of the things that really marks the Austrian school of thought is this anti-socialism. When he's using the term socialism, he's using this as a catch-all term for command economies. Socialist economies, communist economies, dictatorships, doesn't matter what it is, but these sort of collective command economics. He's really against these. In fact, to be fair to say, this was his attitude towards socialism and everything that goes along with it. He's not a fan. He is, in fact, a really huge fan of our good old-fashioned capitalism, our free market, our free enterprise economies, as opposed to socialism. And one of the big problems here you'll notice is when we start talking about socialism, think about what needs to be known. One of his big criticisms of any kind of socialist system was what he called the pretense of knowledge. The pretense of knowledge. A pretense is where you think that you know something, or you think you possess some kind of quality, and you don't. It'd be like some really just hideous-looking guy thinking he's the best, handsomest, sexiest man ever. That he'd have this pretense that he was a good-looking guy when he clearly wasn't. And the pretense of knowledge is going to be that people think they know things when they actually don't. And this is kind of the big criticism he has of socialism, is any kind of command economy where you wind up having a government or a government agency or a group of people in charge of guiding the economy. They think they know lots of stuff, but they don't. And that's a problem, because if you want to guide your economy correctly, you need to know lots of stuff. So what happens if you're in charge of guiding that economy? You think you know lots of stuff, but it turns out you don't. You're a freaking idiot. Or you're just really ignorant. So this is the pretense of knowledge. And just take into consideration what's kind of results you're going to wind up having with that economy. And this goes back to our whole invisible hand. Here, let me draw the invisible hand again. Yeah, this joke never dies. But it goes back to the invisible hand with Smith, where we wind up having lots of stuff that is going on here with the economy. And I don't want to say too much because we're going to have a discussion about this later. But it goes back to Smith and the invisible hand as far as what's going on, that you don't need to know lots of stuff with the invisible hand. Nobody needs to know everything or even lots of stuff with the invisible hand, whereas socialism you do. Capitalism, which is using the invisible hand, does not need to know lots of stuff. You only need to know your piece of the equation. This is kind of the crux of the matter, and one of his defining criticisms of any kind of socialist system is the need for knowledge and the impossibility of possessing it, and how that winds up affecting the economy in some really negative ways. So when people create these socialist systems and they think that they can actually make it work this time, and this is a constant theme, by the way, in any kind of socialist system, is no matter how much it's failed in the past, this time we can make it work. This time we can do it because we've got the know-how and the smarts and we've learned from past mistakes, and now we've got new technology and new theories, and this time it's going to work. And Hayek's response, his eternal response to all this, is going to be, yeah, that's cute. That's sweet you think that. Oh, bless your heart. Or whatever it would have been in the original German. That it's just ridiculous that you think that you can actually do this. You can pull it off. It doesn't matter. You're still a human. And no human is going to be able to possess the knowledge necessary. So when you're reading this and you're looking at what he's talking about the planning, he's distinguishing between two different types of planning. One of them is okay, another one of them is not. And how this relates to the socialist and capitalist systems. In a socialist system, what must necessarily be the case if you're going to have an agency guiding the economy or a government guiding the economy and owning all this stuff. There are some things you may not find all that appreciable or all that desirable. So I'm going to throw a few of these little meme quotes at you here, and this you look at these and then bear these in mind when you're reading the piece to be able to help you out. One other thing that I forgot to mention earlier, as far as terminology goes. When he's talking about economic liberalism, he's talking about capitalism, all right? He's talking about free market systems. Don't get thrown off by that whole liberalism thing. He's using liberalism in a very classical sense. He's not using it in the modern American political sense. So he's saying economic liberalism. He's not talking about modern, Democrats or modern progressives or liberals or something like that. It's not what he means at all. He's not even really necessarily using it in a political bend. He's using an economic bend. So when he's talking about economic liberalism, capitalism. All right, but let's go back to the little picture here. The more the state plans, the more difficult planning becomes for the individual. So bear this in mind when you're reading this, when we talk about the planning and what this means. Or how about this one? There is all the difference in the world between treating people equally and attempting to make them equal. All right, well, what does that mean when we're looking at all this socialism and planning? Now, it's also important to bear in mind here that Hayek was not some kind of anarchist. He didn't think there was no place for government at all. And the later paragraphs here that have been included in your reading talk about this, that he thinks that there is an appropriate role for the government. But this can be rather narrow as far as what it should be doing. So it gives you some examples of that. And we've talked a little bit about these things in the past. We'll discuss them more in class. But what is it that he thinks the government should do? And finally, I'll leave you with this quote, where he's talking about what the goal of economics is. The curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design. Think about the knowledge problem again. All right? Okay. How about the questions?